Attorney Catherine Scott arrives at the state's largest prison to interview 50-year-old married Joyce Tilly Mitchell, who works as the head of the sewing shop at the facility. The consultant asks Tilly various questions, but she's really interested in only one thing: whether Tilly had intimate relations with the two inmates who escaped. Tilly denies any relationship with the prisoners, recalling her steady life with her husband. Every morning he drives her to work. Tilly manages the sewing shop in the state's largest prison. The workers appreciate their boss for her cheerful nature and humane attitude, but there's someone who loves her especially: shift supervisor and inmate David Sweat. Secluding herself with him in the machine shop, Tilly periodically cheats on her husband, thinking no one suspects a thing. David's friend, lifer Richard Matt, watches this romantic affair with interest, hoping to use it to his advantage. However, when guard Palmer asks him about rumors concerning the couple, Matt pretends he hasn't seen anything. Moreover, he warns David that they're being watched, and there's a risk that the boss's husband will find out everything. After the conversation with his older friend, David begins to avoid Tilly, fearing that people will find out and he'll get into trouble. Richard continues to observe the couple while attending to his own affairs. Over many years in prison, he has earned respect among both inmates and guards, so heart-to-heart talks with Palmer have become a nightly routine, allowing Matt to get everything he needs for a comfortable life. Lyle, Tilly's husband, works at the same prison, so gossip about his wife's meetings with a young criminal quickly reaches him. He tries not to believe the rumors, but doubt begins to grow. On the weekends, Lyle takes Tilly to a museum and gently asks her about the inmate she's often seen with. The seamstress realizes that rumors have reached her husband, but she manages to make him feel guilty, calling his accusations dirty and hurtful. A little time passes, and David asks Tilly for forgiveness for his abruptness, pleading with her to start over. She gladly accepts him back into her arms, not noticing that Matt has observed the changes in her mood. Seizing the opportunity, Richard also begins to show Tilly attention, understanding that it could benefit him. Tilly recounts all of this during her interrogation with the attorney. Catherine repeats the question of whether any of the escapees gave her gifts, but this makes Tilly nervous. Much like guard Palmer a few months earlier, upon learning that cells were going to be searched, he had to help Matt hide paints and canvases, which are prohibited, to keep their friendship a secret. Palmer opens a maintenance tunnel and asks Richard to stay there. After the search, Matt taps to David. They realize that the inspectors don't move the bed or look behind it. This prompts Richard to revive his escape plans, which have long troubled him. Remembering where Palmer hid his paints, Matt begins to visit the maintenance corridor more often, planning to use it for the escape. He shares his idea with David, but the young man is afraid even to think about it, understanding that if they're caught, they'll be transferred to the worst block of the prison. Another workday begins. Knowing about his friend's close relationship with the boss, Richard hints to David that he could ask his girlfriend for a flashlight they need for the escape. Just as the opportunity arises, everything falls apart. Upon learning that the couple often secludes themselves, management orders David to be removed from work in the sewing shop. Losing his job leads to David being deprived of his good cell, and he's transferred to another block. Tilly is angry at everyone for taking away her only friend among the inmates. She refuses to work with other staff, hoping that David will be transferred back, but despite her complaints, a new shift supervisor appears in the shop. In the meantime, she writes a letter to David and asks Richard to deliver it. Richard passes the letter to his friend and insists that he write back to Tilly. They still have a chance to use her infatuation to their advantage, but David again refuses to involve his girlfriend and still doesn't want to participate in the escape. Deciding not to miss the opportunity, Richard begins to ingratiate himself with Tilly, asking about her family and standing up for her in front of other inmates. He also tells her a sad story about his daughters, hoping to elicit sympathy. In gratitude, Tilly calls Richard's daughter, whom he hasn't contacted in over 6 years, and, introducing herself as a good friend, she shares news about his life. The seamstress starts having problems at work. The management notices her attitude toward another shift supervisor and hints that it's affecting productivity. She's asked to pull herself together and improve performance. Learning about Tilly's call, Richard realizes that the unhappy woman is hooked and he can replace Sweat. Meanwhile, David isn't getting along with noisy neighbors on another level. Another clash ends in a fight, and his nerves begin to fray. Moreover, a call home only upsets David. He learns that his mother refused to request his transfer to another prison in warmer regions. All this helps him make a decision, and he tells Richard he's in for the escape. To seduce Tilly, Richard gives her a painting depicting her dogs. This touches her so much that she immediately invites him to the machine shop and kneels before him. Tilly starts a new affair, unaware that all of Richard's compliments are merely a ploy for momentary pleasure and the upcoming escape. The new romance gives Tilly a second win. The seamstress visits a beauty salon, dreaming of winning over her new friend. Richard asks Palmer to return David to the neighboring cell. The guard can't help but is willing to turn a blind eye to certain violations. Tilly also visits a hardware store to buy some tools so Richard can paint a picture for her. She's surprised that he needs 2 pairs of glasses and metal hacksaws for this, but doesn't ask questions to avoid spoiling her happiness. The men's plan begins to materialize. While Tilly hides files and packages of ground meat, Matt hires someone to set a cell on fire so David gets transferred back. Everything works out. The seamstress passes the package with the meat through Palmer, David moves back next to his old friend, and the upcoming escape draws nearer. Now, in the evenings, the men saw through the wall behind the bed to access the maintenance tunnel from their cells, and during the day, Matt continues to persuade Tilly to bring everything they need for the escape. Palmer and his wife invite Tilly and Lyle to a bar, and pulling her aside, the guard warns that he will no longer deliver packages to Richard. The night arrives when the men first exit their cells to scout the path. They manage to find exits to the surface, but all of them are still within the prison grounds. On their way to work, the men compare notes and scout out which direction they need to move next. Richard begins to have problems with his girlfriend. She suddenly starts feeling guilty because she misses David. Lyle finds a painting given to his wife by an inmate among her belongings. Suspecting something is amiss, the jealous husband plans to confront the criminal who is currently visiting his friend and admitting that he now also has something going on with Tilly. Moreover, he asks his friend to give his girlfriend his worn shirt so she can feel better and simply imagine herself in the company of both friends. The next day, the jealous husband comes to the sewing shop to sort things out, but the clever older man manages to come up with a good excuse. He says that Tilly ordered the painting as a gift for her husband on their wedding anniversary. Richard tells Tilly about what happened but doesn't mention the story he fed to the cuckolded husband. At the end of the workday, David meets his former lover in the prison yard and quickly hands her the shirt. While checking the path once again, David discovers that a wall is blocking them. The guy loses faith in their success, but his older comrade reassures him, explaining that it's just an obstacle they can overcome. Now, having obtained a sledgehammer, David descends into the shaft at night and breaks through the wall, carving a path to freedom, while Matt continues to entertain Tilly to maintain a reliable ally on the outside. Each time he returns just before dawn, David paints over the secret passage and goes to sleep, but even the guards notice that he's constantly sleep-deprived. Despite her affair with the older comrade, Tilly doesn't forget about David. She sends him cute photos meant to lift his spirits and writes candid letters while lying on her marital bed. The escapees face the final wall, but it's the strongest, reinforced concrete. According to David's calculations, it will take at least 5 years to get through it. He begins chiseling away while Richard dreamily tells him about how they'll end up in Mexico after the escape. The guys decide to tell Tilly about their plans and invite her to go with them. At their next meeting, Richard treats his girlfriend to some liquor and hints at the escape. Realizing it's not a joke, the seamstress joyfully begins to dream about fleeing to Mexico with both of her beloved men. Suffering from the heat near the steam pipes, David continues to break down the wall. Meanwhile, Tilly's life becomes increasingly difficult. Fulfilling all her needs at work, she more and more often refuses intimacy with her husband, despite his attempts to restore harmony in their family. David's patience also begins to wear thin. The wall is too thick and strong, and he lacks the strength to break through. But Matt reminds him of the victory cigar they'll smoke once they're free. Learning about her friend's plans, Tilly can think of nothing else. She constantly asks Richard about the escape, but he urges her to wait patiently and not damage her relationship with management to avoid getting fired. To bolster his girlfriend's courage, the inmate vividly describes their future idyllic life in Mexico. David gets excellent news. He discovers that the heating pipe has been turned off for the summer and they can use it to get beyond the wall. Now they just need to cut openings for entry and exit. Richard informs Tilly that they're almost ready and that she needs to do one more thing for him. The prisoner asks her to go outside to see the place where she'll be waiting for the escapees. Lyle spends time with his grown son and they manage to discuss the family's tension. His son advises him not to forget their anniversary and to find a way to please his mother. Palmer once again delivers a package from the seamstress to Richard, declaring that he no longer wants to be involved. A quarrel ensues between the men, and the guard threatens to strip Richard of all his privileges. Finally, David manages to cut the first opening and crawls into the pipe. He manages to crawl only a short distance when he's suddenly overcome by a panic attack due to lack of oxygen, derailing their plans. Richard also faces unforeseen difficulties. Tilly complains that she might be fired for failing to meet the pants production quota, which would prevent her from helping the guys. Richard manages to resolve the issue by temporarily removing the shift supervisor who is hurting her performance and could jeopardize the operation. In the yard, Tilly waits for David and tells him about Richard's dreams concerning them. David realizes that she knows everything and feels that Richard shouldn't have shared the details with her. About a week remains until the escape. Richard is counting on Tilly's car to take them far away, and somewhere in another state, the men plan to ditch her to avoid extra baggage. Unaware of this, Tilly is meanwhile picking out a swimsuit to sunbathe under Mexico's hot sun and gets a fashionable haircut. David finds a solution. He fills a bag with oxygen and takes it with him into the pipe. Tilly's performance also improves. She's no longer at risk of losing her job. The only potential obstacle now is Lyle, who suspects something is wrong after seeing his wife jogging in the mornings. The jealous husband would love to dismiss his suspicions, but when he notices Tilly isn't around on their anniversary, he becomes even more concerned. Despite this, he reserves the best table at a restaurant for their celebratory dinner. Meanwhile, Tilly doesn't waste time and enjoys herself with Richard. Not finding his wife at the restaurant, Lyle goes home while Tilly sits in a local bar, thinking about how she'll leave her husband. Having had too much to drink, she returns home and a quarrel erupts over the painting that she hadn't even intended to give him. With only a few days left until the escape, Tilly receives a list of everything she needs to gather. David finally cuts out the exit. The day of the escape arrives. Richard informs Tilly, and the trio prepares for the risky venture. By evening, the entire operation is at risk. Riots break out in the prison yard, leading to plans to isolate the inmates. Tilly also can't bring herself to slip her husband's sleeping pills, and out of fear, she suffers a heart attack. By the time the escapees are making their way through the pipe, Tilly is in the hospital. The men emerge to the surface and realize there will be no car. They need a new plan, and David suggests heading into the mountains to lie low until things settle down and then move toward Canada. Counting on Mexico is too dangerous now. At one point, Richard panics, but inhaling the air of freedom, he pulls himself together and understands they've already succeeded. The series is based on the true story of the escape of two convicted murderers serving life sentences from Clinton Correctional Facility, located in the northern part of New York State. The organization of the escape was aided by a married female prison guard with whom both had intimate relationships.